Hello and welcome. I'm Jeff Miller, Technical Solutions Architect with Cisco Systems. We're going to continue with these tutorial videos. I've got a couple out there already that seem to be getting some good feedback. So we'll continue making some of these. Hopefully they help people in their journey to learning ACI and implementing ACI. I'm going to take some of the setup that I used for some of the previous videos and dissect it a little bit because I realized a lot of what I did was very targeted, and I'm just going to keep kind of targeting certain aspects of this scenario and show you how I built the different constructs. So today we're going to focus solely on creating a VPC from Nexus to ACI and what that looks like, and then creating a construct within ACI to associate a Nexus VLAN over layer 2, that VPC, into the ACI world. So in this scenario, we've got our two Nexus switches on the left-hand side in green. And we have a box that we'll use for just testing purposes, which in this case is called MIG Demo Migration Demo 01. On the Nexus side, then we have another box on the ACI side that we'll use for the testing purposes. And then as it relates to this particular video, we're going to use that same ping test utility that is northbound of the fabric, ACI fabric and the Nexus fabric. And then another ping test utility that is part of the ACI fabric to see east-west, right? And this is, in this scenario, is really just going to be for connectivity testing, just to show you if it's up or down. Things like that. But hopefully this will be helpful. I'm not going to probably do a Postman version like I did in previous videos. I will probably just build a video on how to create Postman scripts, because one of the most useful things of ACI is that we have the API inspector, which makes it super simple to really script out anything you do in ACI. If you really want a Postman script for what I'm doing today, maybe I'll make another video just with that scenario. It's not that difficult. Again, one of the beauties of ACI having a RESTful API. You can do any of this stuff via scripting via Python or Postman with JSON. So with that, hopefully that's a good setup, and I'm going to pause for a minute here and we'll jump into the lab. Thanks again for watching. Okay, well, here we are back in the demo. So I guess the lab more than demo, but so let's go ahead and get logged in. And really, whenever we plug anything into the fabric, an ACI fabric, the first thing we do is we go to the fabric and we go to access policies, because you have to configure the physical constructs before you configure any of the logical or policy-based constructs. So I made an entire video on how I view access policies, which you can watch. I'm not going to get into a ton of detail on that, but just as a quick recap, what we're going to do today is we're going to create a VPC that goes out to a legacy world or a Nexus world or just anything that's not ACI. So just as a couple checkpoints, we want to make sure that we have a VLAN pool created. So this is the pool we created in a previous video. The VLAN we're going to use is 120, so it's within this range here. Okay, so we're good there. Close that back up. Then we're going to make sure we have a physical domain association, which we created previously. And we see our demo pool is associated with this demo phys. Okay, which is also associated with this demo AEP. All right, so we can check on that if we want. I know it's there because I just saw it. And the only thing we're looking for here really is just the fact that we have our physical domain associated with this demo AEP. Again, the AEP is what gets applied to the interface. The physical domain is what gets applied to the policy, right? So the first thing we do when we plug something new in, we've already gone through and done all the policy pre-config, pre-work that we did in a previous video, so I'm not going to go through that at all. So the net new plugin anything new to the system might come to my policy groups. In this case, I'm just going to right click and I'm going to say I want to create a new VPC. Okay, we're going to give this a name. It's in my rack A2, and this is a Nexus 5K that we're plugging into. And then I always recommend anything in the function or what the name is of the object we're creating, right? I'm going to turn on CDP. I'm going to turn on LLDP. And then I'm going to pick a port channel policy. So let me scroll down here a little bit. This is an LACP active. Again, we created in a previous video. And the last thing I need to do is my Attachable Entity Profile policy, which in this case is the demo AEP. Right? And that's it. That's all we have to configure, right? We have to configure our port channel policy. We have to configure our, there it is, I was going to say where to go. Our port channel policy and our AEP. The CDP and LLDP are purely optional, but I want to configure those as well. So I'll submit this. Now this is just the policy. We haven't applied it anywhere. So we just created this policy here. Once we create the policy, we need to apply it to ports. So we go back to our profiles. These are all the ones we created in previous exercises. And this is going to be a VPC on leafs 2101 and 2102. So I'm going to use this grouped policy of 2101 and 2102 to apply it. So I've got some VPCs in here already. I'm just going to create a new access port selector. And I like just to call them port. There's really not a right way to do this or wrong. I just do this. And you could end it with, probably the best practice would be to end it with, something like this. It's totally optional for you. This will be ports 39 and 40 on both switches. And then I'm going to grab the policy group that I just created. Okay. It would help if I typed correctly. You still have to type properly, otherwise it doesn't work. So we'll submit. When I submit this, this is creating the VPC. Okay. Something I'm going to do to make my life easier is I'm going to give an interface description here. This area of interface description, whoops. This is version 2.2, so some things have changed on me, clearly. But this description is what you will see if you do a show interface status or you go look at the actual interfaces under any kind of viewing. So if you do like I said, show interface status, or if you just go and look at the inventory, this is what shows up. So if I submit that, it should show, yeah, it shows right here. These descriptions are purely for the GUI, okay, which you could put there too. So I'm going to submit this. So I'm going to look at this a couple different ways, right? So this literally just created a VPC. This is pretty simple, right? There's really not a whole lot to it. If I want to look at this newly created VPC, I can go to inventory and bring up the interface under one of the leaf nodes that I created, look at VPCs. This 101 is my peer group ID that I gave it. And then I'm going to go through here and look. That's not it. That's not it. This part could be a little bit cumbersome. There it is. So it's VPC. It's port channel 346. These are randomly assigned, and this is where having a description really helps out. So it's port channel 6 on the system. So if I come into one of the leaf switches, this is leaf 2102, and show VPC. I see port channel 6 up. If I do a show, so show VPC summary, oh no, that's wrong. Port channel summary interface, port channel 6 in this case. This is what a lot of you use, or it's what I use to tell whether both ports are up. So I see, my 6 is in it's in switched upstate. Both ports 39 and 40 are up, right? So if I did the same on the Nexus side, I would see them go from, this was earlier on, I probably should have showed you that first, but this was before I created the port channel. I'm not showing you the Nexus side config. I assume everyone can do that part. But that was the previous, and then now we're in the same state. So just that little bit of configuration is how you configure the actual physical part of a port channel. Okay. Now that we have that physical connectivity up, we'll show the policy-based configuration. So under the tenant side. So, and what I mean by that is, in our scenario that I set up earlier, is that 101 was on the Nexus side, 102 is on the ACI side. Obviously, since we just created this new port channel and we're only layer 2 connected into the Nexus side, this host has no active access to it. So we're receiving no connectivity. 102 is on the ACI fabric, so obviously we're receiving connectivity with that. I'll show you more what that looks like under the tenant. So as we come into our tenant where I have this configuration built, we've got our VLAN 120. Again, we've got all these constructs already built. The gateway address lives in ACI at this point based upon previous videos about gateway migrations. And the first thing I do whenever I'm building any of these EPGs is it's always helpful to go to operational, right? So these are the hosts that the fabric's learning about. Obviously, we're learning about 102. It's an ACI. We haven't learned about 101 because we haven't associated 101 with the layer 2, the VPC we just did. So if we want to do that, the first thing we need to do is add the domain, right? So we're going to add a physical domain, which is what we created in the demo physical. I'm just going to leave everything default for now, and we'll submit that. Then we'll come under our static ports, or our previously called our static path bindings, and we will add a new static path binding. Basically what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, over this port channel, this one right here, right, so our A2N5K VPC, over this port channel, VLAN tag 120 is going to be associated with this EPG, right? The minute I submit this, it will actually go and configure that. So if I submit here, and now I go back to my switch side, if I do a show VPC, I see port channel 6, my cursor is not very good, with VLAN 120 now associated. Before it looked like these. There was nothing associated, right? And these up here have some because these are other VPCs I have built and running. So everything is purpose configured, right? There's not a concept on the ACI world of once I configure a trunk, everything's allowed. Nothing's allowed until you add policy for it, right? Hopefully that makes sense. As I come into my ping utility, you probably saw it pop up here in the right-hand corner. I now have connectivity. If I go to my east-west, if this is useful at all, I didn't have connectivity before. I was missing, lots of pings, and now I'm up to 12, right? And again, like I said, these ping tests are really just in this, as related to this demo, purely for connectivity viewpoint. So if I minimize this guy, I should be able to go back to my EPG, and I should be able to go back to my operational status, and I see 101 now. I also see some max learn from probably the Nexus side switches, okay? But I see this 101, right? And that's really where I want to get to. I want to be able to see it. I see that it's learned out that VPC. I see this is learned out of a VMM. I'll probably make some videos on VMM integration, specifically around DVS and AVS at some point. But I'm not going to do that right here. Something interesting, though, that I wanted to show you that is new, newer way to do this as well, is, as you can imagine, if I'm going to sit there and create .1Q trunks for a VPC every single time, short of scripting it out, it's somewhat, could be cumbersome, right? So there's a new way to do this. So I'm going to actually delete this static path binding. And this is kind of take it as you will. If either way is totally fine. I just wanted to show you multiple ways to accomplish things within ACI. So if I go back to operational, I'm back just down to the 1, and I just lost connectivity to 101. Okay, so kind of a cool new way to do this that was released in sometime in 2 is that under your AEP, we now have the ability to associate EPGs to an AEP, which means the AEP, if you remember, gets applied to the interface, right? So the minute I configure a physical interface, I apply an AEP. Well, now, if I sit here and say, hey, I want to associate, I'll pick my tenant, I'll pick my particular EPG, or my application, and then my EPG. Now if I say, it probably wants VLAN. Yes, it does. Now what I'm saying is if I see VLAN 120 come out any port that this AEP has been applied to, it's part of this EPG in this application, this tenant. Well, that's a really simple way to do widespread configurations. Okay? And it could be super powerful. So for things like management and other things like that, this could just be another helpful way to do it. So if I hit update here, we should be able to go back to this tenant, and I can already see it was restored. I should be able to go back to this tenant and look at the operational, and voila. I now see anything that AEP is applied to from a port perspective. So in this case, this VPC, anytime we see a .1Q tag of 120 come through, it's automatically part of this EPG. Now, this may not solve every problem, but it's certainly easier than coming here and creating static ports for every single time. Now, the static ports or static path bindings, that was kind of the original way. So this is just a newer way to do it, and I just wanted to highlight it as an option. So as we come back to our ping utility real quick, we see we had some loss. If we go through here, you'd see some outages and things like that. But we're back fully connected. We're all green, which is good and cool. And that's it really for doing a layer 2 associated to an EPG. I will probably make a separate video on just you may be asking yourself, there's layer 2 associated to EPG in this manner that I just showed you. And then there's also an external bridged, which is another way to do layer 2. And the main difference there is that adds an element of security, because when we do the external bridged, we have to use contracts, even though it's layer 2. So I'll probably make a separate video on that. To be totally honest, we don't see a ton of the external bridged configurations used that terribly often. Again, it would be if you wanted to add another layer of security between yourself and another layer 2 network of some sort. So it's definitely useful, but it certainly adds more configuration steps, which also adds more troubleshooting steps in the event of issues. So with that, I've probably spoken enough for this video. Once again, I appreciate everybody watching, and hopefully this was helpful. And as always, please leave feedback and or any suggestions on any other videos or anything like that. But thanks, and have a great day.